as we continue working with multiplying when there are fractions involved. You'll need your jotter. We're just going to do a bit today to play with this, and then we will go into a review. So multiplying when there's a fraction anywhere in the problem, any fraction at all. In this case, let's look at this example. 1½ times 12. So, is there a fraction anywhere in the problem? Absolutely, right here. So, if there's a fraction anywhere in the problem, the first step you have to do, remember, this is just your jotter, but I do want you to jot this down. If there's a fraction anywhere, your first step is to make everything a fraction. All right? But we're going to think through this one before we do that, because I chose these numbers specifically so that you can think through and see why it would make sense eventually to make everything a fraction. So right now we're just going to look at this as, okay, we have 12 whole items. We want to take 1½ times those 12. I could split this apart and say I want 1 times 12 and I want ½ times 12. And then I will put those two amounts together. Well, 12 times 1 is 12, right? If I have a group of 12 things and I have that one group, I have 12 items in it. If I put with that half of the group of 12, you know just by thinking, if I take 12 items and divide them in half, there will be 6 items in that half. So if I have 1½ times 12, I should get 18. Let's check this another way. 1½ the decimal equivalent for half is 0.5. So I can take 1.5 times 12. 2 times 5 is 0. Carry the 1. 2 times 1 is 2 plus 1 is 3. Put a placeholder. 1 times 5 is 5. 1 times 1 is 1. I have multiplied all the digits. So I add those two amounts together. 3 plus 5 is 8. 1. There is one place after the decimal, so I start as if it's a whole number and move the decimal one place in. And what do you know? Lo and behold, I have 18. So I'm pretty sure this answer should come out to be 18, right? Well, now let's look at this rule here. If there's a fraction anywhere, I need to make everything a fraction. How can I turn 1 1/2 into a fraction? Well, in order to turn everything into a fraction, I have to just talk about how many halves there are. In my one whole thing, I'm going to have 2 fractions, 2 halves, so 2 times 1 is 2. I add on that one more half, I have 3 halves. And by the way, in your online practice today, you will be doing this skill, turning mixed numbers into improper fractions. Is it a fraction? Absolutely. It's an improper fraction, but it's a fraction. There's no whole number involved. So if I take 3 halves times 12, oh, good gracious, do you remember how to turn a whole number into a fraction? Well, if you have 12 whole items, each one of those items is one piece. It's the whole item. So to turn a whole number into a fraction, you just put it over top of 1. Lo and behold, now I have fractions. What's the rule when you multiply with fractions? Well, am I adding? No. Am I subtracting? No. Since I am multiplying, numerator times numerator, denominator times denominator. So, no common denominator, just multiply straight across. Numerator times numerator, denominator times denominator. Okay, 3 times 12 is 36. 2 times 1 is 2. All right, Miss Yoder, my answer is supposed to be 18. I have 36 halves. Once you get to where the multiplying is done, you must simplify. So if it's improper, you take the top number divided by the bottom number and do it long division. How many times does 2 go into 3 without going over there? Once. 1 times 2 is 2. Subtract, get a 1, bring down the 6. 2 goes into 16, 8. 8 times 2 is 16. So if I take those 36 halves and put them into groups of 2, I will have 18 whole groups with no halves left. Oh, wait. I'll have 18. Oh, man, isn't that kind of cool? So this proves, once we start with a reasonable number that we can look at in a couple of different ways, this proves that the rule for multiplying with fractions does work. Not all multiplication, when there are mixed numbers and whole numbers and fractions, not all of it is nearly this easy to go, oh, I just do 1 times 12, I do half times 12, add them together, I have an answer. Oh, I can turn 1.5 into 1.5, multiply that, there's my answer. We are very quickly going to be working with problems like 3 7/9 times 4 5/6. Well, you could take 3 times 4, but you'd also have to take 3 times 5/6. You can take 4 times 3, but you'd also have to take 4 times 7/9. And then you would have to add all of those. Yeah, you don't want to do that. That is where just turning everything into fractions and multiplying straight across will make so much simpler your life. What I want you to do with this, now that you have it in your jotter, you need to take and transfer it over into your math folder. So we already have a page that's talking about multiplying fractions. The bottom of it should be empty. I would like you to take this information and rewrite it over on the bottom of the page that we already have with multiplying fractions. So yes, you have to write it twice. Why would I do that to you? Well, now that you've written it once, when you copy it over into your folder, it will make more sense, and it's going to be here in your jotter when you start doing some more work with this in the coming days. So you need to copy from your jotter the example with 1 1/2 times 12 and your rules. There was a 1, there was a 2, there was a 3. So this information needs to get into your math folder from your math jotter. That's part of your assignment today. What else are you going to have to do? Well, I know it's Monday, so I know when you are watching this video, you probably have not gotten to school to pick up this paper. It is at school, and it is in the library. If you want to come in early and have somebody get it for you, it should be perfectly fine. But I also have taken photographs of this and linked it up in the Google form for today. So you may have to just copy down the numbers and do the work with them. So 1 and 2 ask you to show which one is larger. You will need a common denominator. This first one's not too hard. All you need to do is change the 6. Whatever you do to the bottom, you have to do to the top. Then you look at this new fraction and see, is that larger or smaller or equal to the other fraction that was already in the denominator that you're going to get. What about number 2? Same size pieces. Oh, you are going to have to change both of these fractions. So make sure you show me what you are multiplying both fractions by, but put your new numbers right down here. That way you can say, oh, very easily, once I have the same size pieces, which one is larger, and put your greater than, less than, or equal to sign up here as well. You might be able to eyeball these and say, oh, I think one of them is definitely larger, but I want you to get the pieces the same size to prove it. Number 3 then, it gives you this table. Now, if you are doing this part of the assignment without having this paper in front of you, you don't have to copy off this part of the chart. What you do need to do is find the combined weight of all the phones. So you would copy this part of the chart, but then your next step, wow, 6ths, halves, thirds, and fourths. You cannot put these fractions together until you have common denominators. My suggestion is to get common denominators here in the chart, and then add your first 2, get that answer, and add the next amount, get that answer, and add the final amount. Number 4, I want you to change number 4, so be very careful. Number 4 gives you 3 5/7 of a mile, 5 1/2 miles. It asks the total. I do not want the total distance. I want to know how much farther she walked in the afternoon. So how much farther did she... Just might as well get rid of this whole last sentence they wrote. How much farther did she walk in the afternoon? So if you have 2 amounts and it's asking how much farther or how much more one of them is than the other, that means you will need to subtract. And on this one, you will also need to borrow. Okay? Number 5, it wants the answer as an improper fraction. I want the answer in simplest form. So I want it as a mixed number again. He bought a box of fruit that weighed 3 1/4. If he bought a second box that weighed 7 2/3, again, I do not want the combined weight. I want to know how much more the second box weighed. How much more was the second box? If it wants a total, you would add these 2 weights. Since it wants how much more the second box was, you need to subtract. And I will say this, you don't always have to borrow when you subtract every time. 6, I am going to let this question as it is, but I want the answer in simplest form. That would mean mixed numbers and your simplest fraction. Make sure that you show me all of the work. Again, if you are doing these sheets, these problems without the paper in front of you, it is perfectly fine if all you do is write down the numbers, do the work, but don't forget you'll need a label. So once you do the work for number 4, it will be that many miles. For number 5, it will be that many kilograms. For number 6, it will be that many cans of vegetables. Now we get into what you've done more recently, and that is the multiplication. This problem here is one of the few that is like I just showed you today. So here you're going to take 1/2 times 3 1/2. We're not adding, we're not subtracting, so we don't need common denominators. We do, however, need everything to be a fraction. 3 whole things with 2 pieces in each, that means I have 6 pieces plus 1 more. I have 7/2 times 1/2. Now I just multiply straight across, get an improper fraction, and then take top number divided by the bottom. And that will translate into a mixed number, your whole number and your pieces that are still halves or fourths or eighths or whatever your denominator turns out to be. Don't want to make that too easy on you. Number 8, 2/3 times 9. Again, if you do not have the paper, you don't need to make the drawing, but they have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 whole items. They are divided into thirds, but really you could look at this and say, wait a minute, if I take my 9 whole items and divide them into thirds, there's going to be 3 in each one. If I take 2, or you could just take 2 out of 3 pieces each time. And figure out, well, if there's 2 pieces out of every 9, there's my numerator. What's my denominator? Another way to look at this, you could say 2/3 times 9/1. If there's a fraction anywhere, make everything a fraction, multiply straight across, top number divided by bottom number to simplify. Same thing for number 9, although this one you might even be able to see your way to the final answer quite nicely without doing a whole lot of other work. Number 10, Ted lived 2 miles from his school. He rode his bike 1/3 of. Of means multiply. Then he walked the rest. How far did he ride his bike? So you need 1/3 of 2 miles. So you're going to multiply. Restaurant used 7 pounds of potatoes during a lunch rush. If they used 1/3 as much beef, how many pounds of beef did they use? Same idea. We have 1/3 of those 7 pounds. Are we adding or subtracting? Nope, so we don't need a common denominator. Are we multiplying? Yes, so we must have every number as a fraction. Okay. Now multiply straight across and simplify. The back of this page is even more of a review, 12, 13, and 14. Or 12, 13, and 15. 14, are we adding? No. Are we subtracting? No. Do we need common denominators? No. Hoo-hoo, life is good. But since we're multiplying, we must have everything as a fraction. So you have one improper fraction times another improper fraction. Multiply straight across, numerator times numerator, denominator times denominator. I guarantee your numerator will be larger than your denominator, so you will have to take the top number, divide it by the bottom number. This will tell you how many whole amounts you can make. Your remainder will tell you how many pieces. So that will be the numerator. Your denominator will stay the same as it was, because that's how many pieces it takes to make a whole thing. You might need to simplify. If you can divide top and bottom by a common factor, you will need to do that as well. So this one is one that's really going to show me if you are ready for what we're going on to in the coming days. Make sure that you do the online practice turning mixed numbers into improper fractions before you do this assignment. So you might want to come back and watch this video as you are doing the assignment. I don't mind, since you're not here in the classroom, to ask me when you have questions. Listen to what I said about number 1, do number 1. Listen to what I said about number 2, do number 2. Do your very best. A photograph of your answers. Make sure if you're writing it on paper that you put the number, all of your work, and make your answer very easy for me to find. Send me that photograph. Thank you.